Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Rosalind Clark, and I'm here to thank you for coming out to spend time with us at Healing Our Mississippi Everyone Home. Jean Ashcraft and I would like to welcome you here to the Hill Country Network spot. We have today Dr. Joe Ed Morris. He is a psychologist in private practice in Tupelo, Mississippi. I know Dr. Morris because he was my Psych 101 teacher. And I obviously enjoy psychology because I got an A in the class. And I tend to use it frequently. I analyze everything, I discuss everything based on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, because I think that most nurses love care plans, but we appreciate knowing the diagnosis. And with Maslow's hierarchy, the diagnosis tends to come out, am I right? Because we're trying to focus on mental health, because Healing Mississippi is going to require a whole lot of mental healing because we have a lot of fear. So I'm going to stop talking and introduce you to my Psych 101 instructor, Dr. Joe Ed Morris, and he's here to talk with my mentor. So, Mr. James Howard Meredith, enjoy Dr. Joe Ed Morris's information and sharing. Thank you, Dr. Morris.
Thank you. Well, it's an honor to be here for a lot of different reasons, but mainly to be here on the same stage with one of my heroes is quite an honor to have that experience. I am standing right now on the stage in the auditorium that was my Saturday babysitter. On Saturdays when I was growing up in New Albany, a lot of people came to town. My parents had a jewelry store downtown. It's now a little fast food restaurant. And my mother gave me a quarter at 10:45 and told me to go to the theater. We called it the picture show. And we were to stay there until 9 o'clock at night, my brother and I. So we were in this theater from 11 o'clock in the morning until 9 o'clock at night. And after I had seen all of the serials and Movie-Tone News and the two movies, you can imagine what kind of devilment I got into to make it last until 9 o'clock at night. And by the way, later I became a psychologist, so I had a lot of training. Humor is a part of healing. I'm not saying that our situation in our state is a laughing matter, but I'm saying that humor can allow us to transcend the situation, to get beyond it, and to look back and maybe even chuckle. I remember one time I was trying to open my sock drawer and it wouldn't open. And I kept struggling with it. Finally, I got a little angry and I pulled on it real hard and socks went flying everywhere. And then I fell back on the bed and I started chuckling. I thought if anybody had a camera on me right now, they would be getting a really good laugh. So laughter, I was thinking about this on the way here, and I was thinking about how people in slavery endure. And I wonder, humor plays a role in it. I wonder if there were times when somebody cracked a joke or they were singing a song, that there was a few seconds of freedom, a few seconds of transcending their situation. And humor does that. Some of you may have read Dante's Divine Comedy. It wasn't called a comedy at first. It was called the Divina. And then later, as he's writing the final pages, he has Jesus resurrecting and looking back at the devil and getting the last laugh on him. So it became called the Divine Comedy. We're getting down to more serious matters. Rosalind has talked about Maslow and the hierarchy of needs. And I don't have one that I can do a blow up and show you here, but at the bottom are the physiological needs, and then come the safety needs, then come love and belongingness. I think Maslow got it mixed up at that point, by the way. And then come esteem needs, cognitive needs, aesthetic needs, and at the top, self-actualization, where you're realizing your full potential, becoming everything one is capable of becoming. Well, over the years, a lot of years, I have tinkered with that. I wasn't comfortable with it. I thought it was too cut and dried. I thought it was too one-dimensional. And so I came up with something else I want to share with you today. We all have needs. We all have basic permanent needs. Now, psychologists and writers over the years have put together quite a list of them, and I've condensed them into 5, which are more manageable for me. And that says PN, it's at the center. One of the permanent needs we have is for self-respect. This might fit in Maslow's esteem needs. We have the need to like ourselves. We have the need to feel good about ourselves. We have the need to be centered. We also have the need for self-worth. We have the need to feel good about ourselves, to feel that we are worth something and we are of value. Then we have, besides self-respect and self-worth, we have the need to have self-trust. We need to trust ourselves and to feel that what we do is reasonable and rational and appropriate. Then we have the need to love and to be loved. And we have the need to be successful, however we might interpret that. My handwriting is a little better than that, but this board's a bit shaky. Now, that's good. Basic permanent needs. Self-respect, self-worth, self-trust, to love and be loved, and the need to be successful, however we might define that. But then problems develop. These are great permanent core needs. But then we have perceived needs. These are the things we think we need. Now let's go back at our checklist over here. Let's look at self-worth. There's a person who is on a diet, and they go to their grandmother's for Sunday lunch, and she's got a favorite cake, caramel cake. And they're on this diet, but they see that caramel cake and they think they need that caramel cake. But if they eat that caramel cake, they will diminish the need to have self-worth. Let's take another one. The guy that needs to feel he's worth something, so he goes out and buys a Jaguar convertible and rides around town and looks like he's worth something. The problem is he can't live in that car. He's got to get out of it. The car is basically a cosmetic veneer of worth, and inside, in the core here, it's empty. But he thinks that's creating self-worth for him. And you can think of multiple examples beyond that one example of things that we do to make us look like we're worth something. And the need to self-trust. You can go back to the caramel cake. If he eats that caramel cake, he's diminished his self-trust. He's diminished his love for himself and to be loved, and the need to be successful on his diet. In other words, these little 5 permanent needs can serve as a checklist for decision making that anytime we have a decision to make, is it going to increase self-respect, self-worth, self-trust? Am I going to love myself more, love others? Are they going to love me more? Am I going to be successful in whatever I'm endeavoring to do? Now you might ask, Mr. Meredith, what does this have to do with the needs of Mississippi? But I'm getting there. I'm laying the foundation. Besides perceived needs and permanent needs, yield to values. These are the things that bring meaning to our life, that we base our decisions upon, our values, and values in turn lead to attitude. Now, it's just a short skip and jump from values to attitudes when it comes to the issues that are confronting not only Mississippi today, but our nation. Because my values determine how I'm going to view an immigrant, my attitude towards immigrants. My value is going to determine my attitudes toward LGBT community. It's going to determine how I feel about people of a different color, a different race, a different religion. So you can see this unfolding process that is gaining some strength here if we stay with our permanent needs, use that as a checklist, and we see ourselves developing values and attitudes that are healthy, there's that word again, that are caring, and that are loving. Well, I told you this is Crash Course Psychology 101. If I didn't, I meant to tell you that. Permanent needs lead to perceived needs. They're combined lead to values and attitudes and values become quantified and lead to habits. Now, habits, we have good habits and we have bad habits. There are habits that unlock doors and habits that close doors. So, what's the next step regarding habits? Our habits can get us into trouble. Habits can get us out of trouble. The final circle in this unfolding development of a person is circumstance. Now, we're getting closer to the core reason why we're here today. There are a lot of psychological programs. There are a lot of programs that are not psychological that say if we just attack problems up here and we change the circumstances, then we've changed the person. And we've changed the person's approach to problem solving. But there's a problem with that. By going to the circumstances out here and just dealing with the circumstances, what are some of those circumstances? Let's have another government program. Let's have another government interference. Let's have another plan implemented by bureaucrats. Now, those are not necessarily bad, but do they get at the core of the problem? What I feel, and a lot of others with me feel, is that you change the person not by approaching at the periphery of his life or her life, but starting at the center and moving out. And that's when you begin to see change based upon the 5 permanent needs. Now, let's talk about Mississippi and how it relates to this. Healing in Mississippi. Mr. Meredith, I overheard some of your comments on an interview back there when you were sitting. I was sitting a few rows in front of you, and I heard you say something about Mississippi, and did you know this and did you know that? But I'm sure you know, and y'all know, that Mississippi is number 1 in giving and donating So the potential is here, the capacity to reach out, to start in the middle and move out towards the periphery. Otherwise, we just end up trying to solve problems on the periphery. Now, I did a little research. I don't know how I'm going to do this. Bear with me. I've written some books, and one of the books I wrote was New Testament Stories, What Do They Say Today? And in doing the research for one of the healing stories of Jesus, I came up with some movements that are starting at the core and not on the periphery out here. Two of them are right there in Tupelo, Mississippi, the Good Samaritan Clinic and the Free Clinic. These are volunteer programs. They're not implemented by some bureaucratic, by some bureaucracy, or it's coming from the heart of people. And that's what we need to do and need to think about in Mississippi. Another one is Health Ministries of the United Church of Christ. I don't know whether you've heard about this or not, but I'd like to inform you, if you have not, that their Council for Health and Human Services Ministry is a nonprofit association of more than 350 UCC-related ministries and programs engaged in primary and acute health care. Folks, they're not operating on the periphery of circumstance. They're coming from the very caring center of the core of permanent needs being met. Another one is the Partnership for a Healthy Mississippi. You ever heard of that? Anybody heard of that? Partnership for a Healthy Mississippi is an example of the public-private partnership concept. The partnership, funded by money from the Mississippi Tobacco Settlement, utilizes a network of community youth partnerships and faith-based organizations to help change the culture of Mississippi. This is where it's at. That's not good English. But this is where we need to be focusing our thinking and our attention. And there were some other things in here too that I don't need to go into now. But my wife and I enjoy watching PBS. And one night, this fella came on, and he's a conservative. So I don't see myself as politically conservative, but I thought, let me try to keep an open mind and see what he has to say. He wrote a book, Love Your Enemies. And I thought he had some very good comments and practical statements to make, and I'd like to share those with you. Love your enemies. He said, rule number one, stand up to your opposition, but refuse to be used by the powerful, but don't give in. Number two, escape the bubble. Go where you're not invited and say things people don't expect. I thought, what would I do? Where would I go? I really don't want to go to an NRA meeting, okay? But he says that's how we get to know the people we do not agree with. Say no to contempt. Treat others with love and respect, even when it's difficult. Never treat others with contempt, even if they deserve it. Just be a nice person. If we're going to bring about change in Mississippi, healing in Mississippi, caring in Mississippi, we need to listen. Disagree better. Be part of a healthy competition of ideas. And the last one is tune out. Disconnect more from the unproductive debates. Unfollow public figures who foment contempt, even if you agree with them. You need a break. When you return, resolve to pay attention to ideas, not just to politics. Have a little humor. Transcend the situation. Look back on it. Think clear about it. Those are some thoughts that came to me when I was asked to make this presentation about healing in Mississippi. There were, some years ago, some research was done about the 5 different psychological theories: Freudian, cognitive, some of the others, I can't really reel them off right now. But in their research in these 5 modalities, it didn't matter what approach or theory the therapist took. The number one single factor that caused healing was the therapist was a caring therapist. If the person felt that the therapist cared about them, they felt they were getting healed. They felt like they were getting better. There's a scripture in the New Testament about the 10 lepers. Y'all read that scripture? It's an interesting story. Jesus tells the 10 lepers to go show themselves to the high priest. And then it says, while they were on their way, they were healed. Well, folks, we're on our way here. We're on our way here, moving from the center out. Thank you very much for having me today. Now, we know about your entry into Ole Miss. Did you know that you stole the thunder of another person who became famous that same night? Did you know that that was when the Johnny Carson show debuted?
I did not.
I did a considerable amount of research on your entry into Ole Miss because I was part of it in the novel that I was working on. But I just always found that kind of ironic and curious that he didn't have many people watching his show that night.
I didn't know that.
Okay. Well, you have that distinction now. You know that. But we know about the Ole Miss situation, but a lot of people may have forgotten that you engaged in a walk through Mississippi. You were in the walk, and I think it was up and around Tunica somewhere, I'm not sure, but a man shot at you. Is that correct?
He shot me.
He shot you. Okay, well, I'm a psychologist, and I don't want you to get re-traumatized here. Tell us the details, but I'd like to know how that affected you, if it affected you at all, to have somebody shoot you when some of your own heroes had been assassinated.
It really didn't touch me at all. As a matter of fact, it was 40 years before I cared enough to find out who it was.
Wow. That's another reason you're one of my heroes. What is your advice today to those today whose civil rights are being adversely affected? And I'm talking about the LGBT crowd. I'm talking about immigrants. And also the racial and religious problems. What is your advice today to these people who are being affected, their civil rights are being affected, endangered, and threatened?
Basically, I think there's only one solution to all of the problems of the Western Christian world today, and that's God's plan. And as indicated through his Son, Jesus Christ, and the teachings of Jesus Christ is, in my view, the only answer to our problems that will work. When you get a chance, I had a question about your earlier comments.
Sure.
That caught my attention.
Go ahead.
You said what I've heard a lot of times, that Mississippians give more than any other people in the United States. is there a psychological theory as to why that is?
I think, I'm prejudiced. I think Mississippi is a special place. And I think if we went back through the layers of history, we would find, embedded in that layer, we would find great people who broke the norm. For example, Lucius Quintus Cincinnatus Lamar was my great-great-uncle. He freed his slaves before the Civil War. And there are others that we can think of. I mean, Fannie Lou Hamer and some other great Mississippians, white and black. I just think, I don't know whether it comes from our rural values, I don't know whether it comes from our Christian values, and it's probably a mosaic and a combination of all of the above. But to me, Mississippi is just a special place that cares for people. You talked about New Albany. I grew up in New Albany, and this was in 1950, in the 1950s, and I went with my mother. So she was, her Sunday school teacher was Marjorie Houston, who was a prominent figure, and then there was another Mary Hall. These were progressive thinking women who had Christian principles attached to their social theories very strongly. And I remember my mother one day, a lady saying to her, said, "Oh, this integration is wrecking our Southern way of life." And my mother looked at her and says, "Catherine, there is no Southern way of life in heaven." And I heard these kinds of things a lot. So I probably rambled more than I meant to here, trying to answer your question. And I bet you got an answer to that question too.
Well, I don't. It's just that I've always been concerned as to why that would be. And I thought that you might have had a theory, or that some psychologists might have had a theory. I've heard it a lot.
Well, you're going to have an opportunity to be with another psychologist tonight. Her name is Jennifer Carroll, and ask her that question.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, I wish you would. Okay, if you could summarize, by the way, back in the dealing with how civil rights are being violated today, in my opinion, a Samaritan today would be a gay Muslim with AIDS. I just ask people, I wonder how they would deal with someone like that. I think it would be dealt with better in Mississippi than it would be in other parts of the country. You have a comment?
Well, I believe that doing God's will, which in my opinion is both best described by the life and teachings of Jesus Christ. And if I understand it correctly, it is people should be good, they should think good, they should teach good. And as a result of that, things become better. I believe that's why Christianity now dominates the world, and as far as I believe it does. I mean, not perfect, but does.
Yep.
I mean, and I just don't see no way other than more of God's will and the teachings of Jesus Christ that will answer any of the problems. As you are aware, I know, because you're a psychologist, Mississippi has been on a racial reconciliation for a long time. And it has never worked, and I don't believe ever can work. I don't think anything can work other than God's plan. Anything else ultimately it's not gonna work.
I can't improve on that, sir. I got this question. That day at Ole Miss, when you crossed that line for freedom for people of color at Ole Miss, can you, in one word, tell us how you felt that day?
I can tell you what my God asked, why you wait so long?
But one word, you got.
Well, why?
Now today, looking back on that, what's your reflection of it in one word?
My father always said the two greatest wastes of time was regretting the past and worrying about the future. I know it's more than one word.
There's several good words. Thank you very much. Now, aside from Ole Miss, and I may be mentioning it too much, but what is the most meaningful moment in your life to this point?
Stop lying to God, like I did most of my life. Every morning I woke up and told him I was going to do his will this time, and every night I went to bed having not done it. Having done, not only not done his will, but did what James Meredith wanted to do.
Who is your hero?
My dad, and I'm being nice,
Your what?
because it's between my dad and my mother.
But you got two heroes. All right, one last question. What do you do for fun?
Don't believe in it.
Okay, let me try that. Let me try
But
that.
the reason is, life should be fun. I was taught that everything you do should be fun. And most of my life, I wondered why my brothers and sisters who grew up in the same house hated Mississippi, hated the sun, hated working in the field, and I loved it.
Well, do you read? Do you read much?
I think I can say without worry of being not lying, not telling the truth. I don't believe anybody has read as many books. I know nobody's checked out as many from the libraries in the last 50 years as I have.
Well, Mr. Meredith, thank you very much. You're more my hero now than you were before this started, brother.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.